All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Countless Vlogcast, episode 32. I'm with my guest, Chris. How are you today?
Good.
So tell us a little about yourself.
All right. I'm Christopher Keene. I'm a New Zealand author. I have lived in New Zealand all my life, and of course, the things that I write generally like fantasy and sci-fi and stuff. I guess the idea is that I have been trying to break into the big time, the one of the big five publishers. I've never really gone into indie.
Mm.
Um, Not hard anyway. And at the moment I'm doing a publishing course, which I hope will allow me to kind of Trojan horse my way into that.
Okay, great. So how long have you been writing for?
I've been writing ever since I can remember. Ever since I think like my first book that I started writing seriously was when I was like maybe 12 or 13. Yeah, just really completely ignorant to the level of skill you needed. And it's if I could go back and tell him one thing, it'd be like, hey, past me, learn spelling and grammar first, before you dive in. Yeah.
That's good to know though, because like you gotta make mistakes. Everybody wants to be a perfectionist. Like when you're growing up too, especially like a teenager too, you're like really like, I need to make this perfect. Even if you're like you're not the best writer too, it's good to have that practice. So it's like, but when did you feel like you'd be more professional? At what age or like what year? What was that moment like you felt professional as a writer?
Well, the first time I felt professional, I guess, was when I started getting contracts from small publishers, which was when I was 25. First contract was from a publisher called Future House Publishing, who accepted my first published book called Stuck in the Game. And that was the first time I was like, oh yeah, I've made it, kind of.
Wow, congratulations on that, man. Even though it was a while ago, it's still congratulations on that. It's always a big accomplishment too, to get like that first like traction going.
Yeah, I mean, I also was like, oh yeah, this looks like a pretty awesome, pretty cool small publisher in America. I'm sure they'll be able to spread my stuff, and it's just another knot on my belt.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the things that inspire, influence your writing?
I guess other books, movies, like just stuff in everyday life. What is it? Sometimes a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of politics every now and then. But I don't really try and push too hard on that. Generally, if I see something cool, or if I see something that like I quite like, or a conversation that I find enjoyable, I try to think of ways that I can weave it into my own story, but in a way that I guess kind of reframes it and makes it either too what it is unique to my story, or in a way it makes more sense context wise, that it's been built up to scenes that essentially have that sort of feel.
That's great. So a lot of like authors and artists are like really modest in their art crafts. Like, what makes you like unique and different than other artists?
Um, I guess I try to be sincere in my writing. I don't try to play on tropes as much. I like to take the tropes and see them as tools rather than things to be subverted. Because a lot of authors, they try to subvert tropes to make them something new, and I don't try to recreate the wheel. I just want to make a really good wheel. You know what I mean? Like I want to do it in such a way that it's concise and clear, and the feelings that that I want to come through in the writing essentially come through in a way that doesn't feel like the author has been tricked. The reader has been tricked.
Okay, great. So, in terms of like other authors that influence you in your writing, who would you say like influence you? So, or you just like reading in like general that may not influence you, like your type of genre. Like who are some of the authors you really like to read?
It's funny because when you think of like people or authors that influence you kind of think to yourself of, it's like post writing and pre writing. It's like the authors that I read before I started writing and the authors that I read while I was writing, and like they kind of get mixed up a little bit because you can't remember the exact year when you started reading an author. A classic one is Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson. I still read him. but I don't know if I actually read him before or after I wrote some of my stories. But I know that my stories were affected by him, by how some of the like magic systems and worlds got changed based on his stories. It's another one is Joe Abercrombie, who I quite like. He's in the grimdark genre, and he does quite like gritty action, and it's quite messy. It's not clean and choreographed. And so I realized, after I started writing, after I've read his stuff, my action has a bit more grit to it, a bit more blood and guts. But so in a way, I'm always being influenced by a lot of writers, but I can kind of pick that up depending on when I wrote a book.
Okay, great. So what's your process of writing? For a lot of people, like it's got a blank sheet. A lot of people like listen to music, watch TV, maybe like read a book, and then they're like writing more. Like, what's like your process for you?
Well, I'm quite sporadic. Like I will generally let an idea kind of stew for a while, couple of months maybe, and I then just go nuts. Like I just like in a week I can just get out a first draft, and it's just like that's a really fun week, but it's a mess, and it's a very messy manuscript, and I have to spend a lot of time editing and making sure that everything that I wrote is legible.
So it's like a lot of people like think that like that's like the hard part of like writing too, like editing too. So how much time you spend on editing? Like that's like one of those important parts before you like publish, because it's like after the rush of draft, like it's like you keep writing and writing and writing. But how often you edit? Like and have people look at your work.
Yeah, I generally spend more time editing than I do writing, and it kind of goes through stages. It's like, what is it? I write it, then I read the first draft, and I'm disgusted because it's like horrible, and I try to fix it as much as I can, but you only can see so much. And then my partner reads it, and I kind of read it with her, and she's decent. And she's decent at finding like plot stuff, which is unique. It's good because like you needed, before you go into the copy editing stage and getting all the fine tuning for the grammar, you need to get that the plot down. And then I send it on to critique groups, and eventually like they can take a while, but eventually I get it to my publishers. And if I'm contracted for a piece that I haven't written yet, generally it skips the critique group and just goes straight to my publisher.
So you use like publisher too. Like how else do you like brand yourself or promote yourself? Do you have like a surname you use for like author name?
No, I generally just use my real name. Most of my branding, I guess, because my publisher owns the rights to most of my writing, so my brand, so to say, is kind of tied in with theirs, and they because they've published most of my stuff, they really know how to like do the cover art. They really know how to do the the promotion and all that, particularly for my type of audience. And yeah, I don't have to work that hard at that, so that's the benefit of being.
That's always great too. Like when you like a writer, you don't want to do like, I mean, like self-publishing is like it's like a job really. Like you wake up and you like have to do all this other stuff too. Like what you're saying is like you have like a publisher you trust too. Like how long did it take you to find a publisher you trusted and an editor you trusted?
Well, I was really lucky. My first publisher was a decent small publisher in the US, and after that, I had other publishers that weren't as great. Like I kind of, I guess you'd say, spoiled by my first publisher. And so when I went into another publisher later on, they didn't do the same level of editing that my first one did. They didn't do the same level of marketing that my first one did. They didn't do the same level of, feedback, and so it was kind of a bit disappointing in that regard. So it's like, well, I get a decent amount of editing and cover art and all the good stuff from this small publisher. I might as well stick with them for a while, because as far as I'm concerned, they put more effort in.
So in terms of like what do you want to learn and like expand on like with your writing and other like aspects of like a writership?
Well, this publishing course that I was talking about before has been very useful for, well, you think you know stuff, like you think all of the rules. You think you know all of the processes, but when you do a course, it really opens your eyes to like the larger picture. What is it? Little details that you never really picked up on before. So in that way, I'm improving through the course. But at the same time, I really want to get into like the marketing angle, because what separates indies and self-published people is to the big five or something along the lines, is the marketing. Is like they get really into publicity and sales, and you know they're everywhere, you know, like, and that's what gets their stuff read, is because everyone's talking about the book and you're like, oh, I've heard about this book, maybe I should read it. And that's what I really want to get into, is just that level of it.
So this is a big question. Who's the audience? And did you find your audience when you first started writing? Or did you find it like way before you started your first book? Or did you find it as you went along with your like other book? Did you find your audience was like came as you wrote after you published, or like before you published?
I found it after. Well, I have two audiences really, because when I first wrote a book, it was a kind of it was a character gets stuck in a video game sort of book, you know.
That sounds cool. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's one of those. But what is it? I didn't know that there was like a huge community online for what they call lit RPG and game lit, and that is essentially what the audience was. And I didn't know about that. My publisher put me onto that, and I just got involved with the community, and they became my audience in a way. So that was my first audience, and then the second audience was obviously, you know, fantasy, which my newest book is.
So with two different audiences, what do you want to take? What do you want people to take away from each genre of your writing?
Sorry?
What do you want people to take away from it? What do you want people to like? What kind of feedback do you want, or what type of
right.
like when the story? What people in your writing? What do you want people to like take away from it?
Right. Okay. From my writing, I guess enjoyment is the most, entertainment is the most important one. If they don't think it's entertaining, then you know it's kind of not really fun to read. But the idea is that also that I like audiences coming back to me and then saying, well, here's I enjoyed the book, but here's something that you might want to work on for the next one. And I love plot holes. I love when people find plot holes that I didn't find in my book, or like my critiques partners or my partner found, because in a way I find plot holes as almost like opportunities for sequels, because I a lot of plot comes out of me trying to fill those plot holes in later books, and I find that really fun.
So like with those plot holes, what's been like the feedback from them? Do people like add to your story? Or they like ask you questions like, oh, what could go there? Like, do they have like back and forth like conversations like that, or?
Yeah, no, I've had a lot of feedback regarding plot holes. Like one for my first book was quite interesting. Was they were like, this isn't how a game would work. This is like if they were trying to find an item in the in the game, they could just look that item up on their software and they could just and I was like, oh, that is a good point. That is a really good point. So I had to I had to add a part in the next book stating that like they couldn't do that for this item because insert reason, and like there was a bunch of those, and they were really fun to kind of cover, like just cover my ass a bit.
That's great. So if you could give like a young author or a struggling author any advice, what could you tell them from your experience?
Well, I'd say do a publishing course for one, because as I said, I'm learning a lot through it. I guess another thing is that they should just stop caring about whether or not they're good. Just because if you're so worried about whether or not your writing is good, you'll never get anything done, and you'll never be as good as you want to be, and like the stuff you're writing will never be as good as you want it to be, because nothing will be. So just do it, and you'll get better over time. That's
great.
That's
great advice. So what's your next project you're working on, like during this quarantine time, and how has it affected your creativity in the quarantine?
Well, I can actually brag about this because I live in New Zealand. We don't have quarantine anymore. We're done.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That's great.
hard to believe. Yeah, we're out in the open. We're fine dandy. So for me, I'm back at the course. My partner's back at work. So at the moment, what I did work on was a book which was an adaptation to a board game called Super Dungeon Explorer, and that's what I was working on. So that was cool because, you know, it's going to bring in a bit more cash, which, you know, is important sometimes.
Yeah.
But at the moment, really, I'm just working on marketing the books that I've got coming out, and that was War of Kings and Monsters. Yeah.
It's great. So I like to end these with like a positive message from you to the world there, to your audience and the community you're around. Like anything you like to share.
Um, Positive message. Yeah, I guess so. Just, you know, it's all relative. You gotta think to yourself, no matter what hardship you're in, you gotta kind of think to yourself, well, if you're born in the first world, you know, you kind of won the lottery in a lot of regards.
Mm.
So, and if you're not, then, you know, think about all of the great things you can do, because in a way, that's what life is. You're trying to achieve. You're trying to thrive, and the more opportunity you have for that, you know, the more satisfying your life can be.
Right. So this is your time to like plug yourself, your social media, your websites, and anything you like to share.
Okay. Well, if you look up Christopher Keene, I have an Amazon page where all my books can be found. I have a Facebook page called Readers Only, a blog called fantasyindanime.wordpress.com, and it's bloody nerdy. If you like really geeky stuff, that's the place to go. But yeah, my latest book, War of Kings and Monsters, classic fantasy, monsters being summoned by you know, people in a fantasy world, and it's basically like medieval Pokemon, and
Okay.
that's me.
Thank you for coming on, Chris. So we appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and your book, and it was great to have you on.
All right, good to see you too, Justin.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. This has been the Countless Vlogcast, episode 32 with my guest, Christopher Keene, an author. Go out, support him, guys, on Facebook, Amazon. Thank you guys for watching, and I'm out. Thank you. Have a good night.
Cheers.